Hello fellow woodworkers and welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop. This week we're going to be making a pair of fold-away sawhorses. Roll the intro. Okay, so there are dozens and dozens of videos on YouTube and across the net on making sawhorses, and the last few weeks in some of the projects I've been doing, I thought it would be really handy if I could have a pair of sawhorses that I could just take out. And now the weather's getting better, I've got loads of bits of wood lying around that I can use as a sort of portable workbench. So I thought it'd be really nice to make some, but the problem is I don't want them lying around in the workshop everywhere because they take up quite a lot of storage. So I've done some research, I've looked at some videos on YouTube and I've looked at some instruction guides online about making collapsible or fold up sawhorses. So that's what we're going to do this week. Now, I've selected some timber from my wood pile, my scrap wood pile. This is all in a variety of different conditions really. As you can see, this has got a big hole in it. They've all got bits of sort of plaster or stuff on them, but for this, I don't think that matters really. As long as the wood is structurally sound, which it all is, I don't think that's going to matter. So I've just picked out 3 bits which I think are all, well, they're all the same size, but I think they're going to be just big enough to give me what I want. I've got a really long piece here which I should be able to get 2 of the legs out of. I've got to remove all the nails. I've got this piece and this piece. So I think between those 4 pieces I've got enough to make them. Now, I did consider using bigger timber, and a lot of the videos online, there's dozens of them, they use the thicker CLS timber. Now for me, I don't think I'm going to need that. I might be proved wrong, but I think this wood, which is just normal C16 studwork timber, I think this is going to be enough, because they're not going to get a lot of use. I'm not going to put tons and tons of weight on them, because if it is something, a project like that, which is very heavy, then I'd use this workbench. So it's more of a sort of leaning on thing. So I'm going to go for a sort of standard design where it looks like this, and when it folds out, I'm going to cut notches out of here, and then another sort of 3rd piece will sit in like that. Really basic standard design. So let's get marking up. We can fire up the saw, fire up the miter saw. Let's get making. So as usual, the first thing I did to start this build off was some really accurate measurements. Obviously with a project like this, when you're going to need to get the surface exactly flat and exactly right on each one, I wanted to make sure that I'd got the markings right. And I also marked inside the pieces of wood which were overly long, just to give me the spare space to knock out the ends. I then took them over to the miter saw and took some time doing the cuts. As you can see, I set up a stop block there, so I got everything exactly the right size, which was absolutely key to making sure this was all level. Okay, so I changed the blade in my miter saw because I was cutting up some scrap wood for the fire pile, and I haven't changed it back. And I just want to show you that now the blade isn't blunt by any means. It's the original Evolution blade that came with it that cuts metal and everything. I just want to show you the quality of the cut, because as you can see, it is not great. And like I said, even though the blade is still sharp, it is, because it hasn't had that much use, it's not a very good cut. So what I think I'm going to have to do, because obviously I'm going to be cutting quite a lot of pieces of wood today, is just pop back on my other blade just temporarily so I can make these cuts and keep them nice and flush at the end and nice and accurate. I mean, they're both good sizes, they're exactly the same size, so it was a good cut, but just quite a little bit of tear out at the end. So I'm just going to quickly pop the blade off and cut the other legs now. When I'd made the individual cuts, I then just made sure they were all lined up and were exactly the correct size. You can see here I'm just knocking off those sort of ends, the sort of unwanted ends, and then I just laid all of them up together to make sure that they were the right size and they were all absolutely perfect. The next thing I did was adjust my miter saw to a 20-degree angle, which is the one I'd worked at for the bottom of the foot. Then I just got a scrap and I just did a test cut to make sure it was 20 degrees, and I used my digital angle measurer, which is a fantastic bit of kit, by the way. Bought that in Lidl in the one of the last special buys, and you can see there 70, so it's 1.2 out, but that's fine, I can handle that. I then offered up all the pieces one by one and made all of the cuts that I needed to make. Again, I'm using the stop block you can just see at the top of the picture there to make sure everything was exactly right. Now, at this point, I did have to nip out and buy another piece of wood because some of the pieces that I showed you at the beginning were just a little bit too small. So I went out, got some wood, cut it down to size, and then I had enough for all of the pieces that I needed for the legs. Okay, so the angle is cut. I just knocked them back a little bit with some sandpaper. So the angles are cut, and they are exactly both the same length. So these bits that I've made are actually the legs. So they're going to stand like that. As I said, they're on a 20 degree angle. So there'll be two of them, and obviously they'll have a crossover point. But in order for it to work properly, I need to cut a notch out of this side so that when it's like this, the piece of wood can sit across like that. So I've made a little cardboard template. Again, the angle at the top is 20 degrees, and I'm hoping that that angle, it should be half of that piece of wood. In fact, it's a little bit over half, to be fair. I'm not sure if you can see that. So I'm hoping that that piece of wood will fit in there nicely. And the good thing about this, of course, is if I've made the hole too big, I can either prop it up a bit more so that it closes, or potentially use a wider piece of wood across the top, which is what I think I might. This is just standard normal CLS stud timber, but I've got some wider pieces. So it might be that I just put a wider piece of wood in. But what I've got to be very careful of here now is that I get these and I alternate them when I'm putting it together. So basically I'm going to put it on there, and again that angle should be 20 degrees. So I'm going to cut that angle off and here, and I think I'll just use a jigsaw to take that bit out. Now I don't have to do it. It doesn't matter which way around I do it because I can just rotate these around. But what I want to try and do is make these in pairs and then just put them together so I know they fit. So I'm going to do that now, mark all these and start cutting them down. The next thing to do was mark up all of the individual legs using the cardboard template that I made and showed you earlier. It took quite a while to do this, but luckily I found out how to use time-lapse on my GoPro. I then went back to the miter saw, and this time I'm cutting the top bit, the opposite part of the legs, just to take that 20 degree cut off the top, which will help it lie flat. So I put that through the miter saw and did them all. Okay, so the cuts are now made, and I've got a horrible feeling I've cut this on the wrong side. So I'm just gonna check. No, I haven't, which is good news. So that is essentially how it's going to work. As you can see, there's a gap in the middle for the wood. There'll be a bolt that goes through there, and that's where the wooden centre will sit. So if I just use a piece of this offcut, which is actually going to be the wood that I'm going to use, it's slightly unaligned at the top, which is obviously deliberate, and then that will sit in there and it will butt up like that, and there'll be a piece of wood, a stretcher, that goes across here to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. It's not the greatest jigsaw cut, one of those. I have to be honest, I might just run that through. This one's okay, but there was a bit of a knot on this piece of wood. And as you can see, it's not a very straight cut at all, that. So I might just get sanding on that now and get it nice and flat. You can probably see it better from that angle. It's just not very flat. So I'll do that now and I'll carry on with the other ones. So then I just began the process of cutting all the notches in the jigsaw. I did start off by trying to clamp it, but to be honest with you, it was really, really difficult to do, and I did have my hand near the blade a couple of times, which I wasn't pleased about, so I stopped and just made sure I took my time. But it did take quite a long time notching out all of these legs. I know there was only 8 of them, but it did take a fair amount of time. I was then able to put them through my bench drill now that I've made that unit for it and it's actually usable. So I drilled them all out using my belt. After it took me a while to reconfigure the belts inside to get it to go a bit quicker, but it worked out really nicely, all really nice clean cuts. I then offered up a pair of the legs just to see how I was going to use the combination of washer and nut. At first I put a washer in between the 2 pieces of wood, so I put the bolt in, put the washer in, put the other piece of wood in, put the bolt on the back, but I actually didn't like that. It gave too much sort of floppy movement within it, so then I took that out, fell out, and then I took the washer out. For the cross braces, I just literally used some pallet wood. I had a pallet at work that was in actually really lovely condition. As you can see, the wood was almost new. So I used some of the bits from that to put the legs, the stretchers across. You have to be careful here because one part of the stretcher goes on the outside and one on the inside, which stops the movement going in the opposite direction. But it took a long time for me to do this. I had to think quite a lot in between leg folds about what was going where and how. Okay. So, as I've come to put the last leg together, I realised I've made an epic error. So what I've done is I cut the angle at the top in the wrong side of this, because as they pivot, they're supposed to be at opposite angles like so that when they grow out they go on the ground. So what I did is I cut the notch out of the wrong side. I haven't got any more wood. So what I've done is I've put the notch on the other side now, and I know it's going to be quite weak with this piece here now only being small, where it should be the whole side, but to be honest with you, I haven't got another option and I don't want to go and buy more wood for a very simple mistake like that. So I'm going to put it together now and hope, fingers crossed, hope it works. It should, it's just whether it's going to be strong enough. But then if it does break, I can make new ones. Oops. And as I've often said to you on this channel, this is a mistakes and all type woodworking experience. Right, so it's on, which is good so far. It's a little bit wonky. I might need to just take a bit of that off. Let me find my piece of wood. It's not the greatest fit, but it's definitely not the worst fit either. So yeah, I'm pretty sure I can live with that. Pretty sure I can live with that. So as you'll know if you watched any of my videos, I do like to keep all my mistakes in, and I do make quite a few. But once I'd sort of got my head around how that worked and how the notching worked, it was actually only one single piece of wood that I'd made the mistake on. So once I corrected it, I put it in, and to be honest, I'm not worried about the strength at all. I was initially when I shot this, but I think it will be all right. I can't see it really being an issue, and like I said earlier, it's not going to have tons and tons and tons of weight. I'm not going to put a car engine on it. It's more for the flexibility and freedom to work outside than anything else, to be honest, without having to wheel out my worktop. Okay, so the project's finished, as you can see. Apologies, you can hear the noise in the background. It's been a lovely day today. So it's finished. Overall, on the whole, I would say I'm happy with how they've turned out. They're really, really rigid. They're very sturdy. and I think they're going to do exactly what I want them to do, which is to provide an occasional support for other times when I want to work outside of the garage workshop. So that's the plus. Now the negative, I thought this was going to be a quite straightforward, easy project. I've watched a couple of videos on YouTube, I've done some research, I thought this was going to be easier, but I'm not really an angles person, and it took quite a lot of jigging around and redoing to get these things on the right way and to get them sitting on the support struts the right ways around. You see, I had a couple of goes, but I got there in the end, so I can't complain. Overall, I'm happy, and they're actually really sturdy. Now, I think what they are going to need is something here to stop them moving. Now, I know a lot of people use bungee cords, which is probably what I will use, but I think there might be a slightly better method. I might be able to cut an angled piece of wood that just slides on the top. The good thing is, they are sturdy, they're really, really strong. They're not absolutely going anywhere at all. And to be honest, they were made mostly of scrap, so it didn't cost me a lot of money, but not the easiest project this. I thought it was going to be much easier than it was, and I thought at one point it was going to be a disaster, but it wasn't. So, if this is your first visit to the garage workshop, thank you so much. Please can I ask you to hit the subscribe button, like and comment, because YouTube seems to like that sort of stuff. If you are a regular viewer, thank you so much for keeping up with me on the channel. It's really great. I've got over 400 subscribers now. I love making the projects. You seem to like watching them, so thank you for your ongoing support. I will see you on next week's episode of the Garage Workshop. Take care.